Hi everyone, I am Hayley Peri, founder and CEO of Dandi, and I am joined here by a very special guest, Ameann DeJohn of Ameann Beauty, and actually she's hosting me in her office, so I'm her special guest.
Aw, it's so nice to have you, Hayley.
Thank you, so nice to be here and to be doing this in person. Ameann is my first in-person meeting, and so it's great to feel like we're getting back to how things were before COVID.
Definitely, we get to be next to each other.
It's awesome and weird at the same time. So, Ameann, in the report we're talking about sustainability, of course, and you've been such a generous contributor in looking at what, how product development really looks in the landscape of sustainability. So, you have been in product development for a long time and in the beauty industry for over 20 years. So, can you just share with the audience a little bit about what it is that you do and how important that is when you're actually putting together products?
For me, beauty is a lifestyle. Beauty is part of who I am, and I've been in product development for over 15 years. And I'm a licensed esthetician, and I help beauty brands take it to that next level when they want to create products. And it's been really interesting just to see the changes in the last 5 years about what people think about creating a beauty brand.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. There has been a lot of changes I've seen on the ingredient side, but what do those changes look specifically like to you as a developer?
You know, I was surprised at the number of brands that came to me and said they wanted to create a sustainable beauty brand, right? They want to create clean beauty products. And especially in the last 5 years.
Okay.
But the problem is nobody really understood what that meant. They knew that they wanted to, but a lot of people that come to me, they're outside of the beauty industry and they don't really understand what that means. You know, when I want to create a clean beauty brand or I want to create a sustainable, that's good for you brand. And I think that's really hard for people to understand. And that's where the changes have come. So they've been coming from the outside in, not from the beauty industry from where I see it.
Okay, and so that's really interesting as they're coming from the outside in. I think that could really explain some of the new dynamics that we're seeing. So what does that mean for industry, maybe as a whole? Or what is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how does that impact your job as a product developer to marry what you know in industry with what brands don't know and how to create that product, if that makes sense?
It does, and I think that it's really about this idea that these brands have about creating clean and sustainable products, and then figuring out how that can happen in the beauty industry, because the beauty industry really hasn't caught up yet with the brands that are wanting to create these new products. And you know, we still need help creating more and having more sustainable ingredients, more sustainable packaging. But yet there's the demand from these new indie beauty brands to make this happen. And I think that's where we're seeing the biggest change, is the demand from the consumers and the demand from these new entrepreneurs that are creating these brands.
Okay, and so as you're saying that it's becoming harder, or it's difficult, maybe industry isn't set up to support that. What are some things that you use as a product developer, as that magic person behind the curtain, to try to bring some of these together and these ideas together and structure it when you're actually creating a sustainable product? What does that look like? So
I think it's important to really think about the brand owner creating the sustainable clean beauty brand, but then how the consumer recognizes that, right? And so I always sort of start backwards and I say, what is the consumer demanding? What are they looking for? So that when you think about your standards, you're not only thinking about what you want to do as a brand, but how the consumer is going to recognize that effort that you've put in to create that sustainable product. And so I start backwards. I start at the certifications. I look at Leaping Bunny, at PETA, the Good Face Project. I look at the Retailer's Guide for certifications. And all of these certifications help the consumer understand that there's a vetting process. And I think that's why the retailers are starting to create these. I mean, Whole Foods as you know, was the guideline for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started to have more and more certifications. You know, Sephora came out, Ulta came out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Credo, Detox Market, you know, those are one of the first ones. And so I say to the brands, look at that as a starting point.
Okay, that's really good advice. And so it's interesting because from where you stand in trying to guide the brands from that to that starting point, as someone who's worked with ingredients, I typically start more at the okay, what is industry doing? And so it is at this unique place where we converge of trying to bring together all the pieces. And then we have this really this interesting point of packaging. It's something that I'm not really well versed in, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say about packaging and what that's like for a product developer in trying to create sustainable products.
It's actually really challenging creating a brand that has sustainable packaging because, again, there's no definition of sustainability in packaging. There is glass, which is easily recycled. More people recycle glass than plastic because they've been doing it for years, right? Glass Coke bottles, recycled, sort of ingrained in you. But plastic was less recyclable, and that is because a lot of the pieces are really small. Sometimes they have different types of plastic all in one. And it's this idea of, you know, do I choose packaging that's more recyclable, like glass, or do I choose something that's been recycled, like PCR? Do I choose an alternate like sugarcane or mushroom? And again, that goes back to the brand because there are no specific guidelines, and every state and every country is a little bit different in how they recycle. So it's really hard to choose. And so what we try to do as a company is try to give the brand the most information that they can so they can decide what's important to them. It's kind of like, you know, when you think about a car, right? Some people are like, well, hybrid is good. Hybrid's good enough. Other people are like, well, why would you, if you did hybrid, why wouldn't you do electric? But again, other people, well, electric, you know, there's reasons not to do electric. So I think that you have to choose and let the brand choose. And the only way the brand can choose is if you give them the information. And the beauty industry is sort of a secret. People don't always understand what's in the beauty industry. And that's what we try to do, is give them sort of like a peek to the inside, or open the kimono, so they say.
That's, I love the car analogy, and I think that really resonates with me. Is that at least when I talk to different people about brand founders, formulators, it's like, okay, well, what is important to you? And so you're a little bit neutral, right? When as a product developer, I mean, as you say, you're just giving them the information so they can decide.
And that's true, because it's not for me to decide, right? It's for the brand to decide. But it's really hard to make those decisions if you don't know what the options are. It's like going to a restaurant and not knowing what to order because there's no menu.
Oh, yeah, that's another good example. And so as you are opening the kimono, showing the menu of what brands can do, what do you see happen with the brands? Like, what is their response, and how do they start interacting with sustainability?
I think that from our experience, brands are really confused that they know that there should be more recyclable options. They know that there should be more clean ingredients, more sustainable ingredients, but they're just not there yet. The beauty industry is not where it should be. And because it's going to take time. And I don't think that these new brands understand that, right? It takes time to create a new packaging mold, to find the PCR, to do all of those things. And then it takes money, right? The packaging suppliers have to create these new molds. They have to create a whole new supply chain. It's not going to happen instantaneously. But it's through the demand of these new brands that's going to make this happen.
Okay. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say, it's really the brands are the push for the innovation for industry, whether it's for ingredients, packaging. Brands are really helping in that sustainable movement in that way.
They are, they're really pushing, but I think that it's also important for a beauty brand, especially a new beauty brand, to understand that it takes time and energy from the suppliers too, right? They don't realize how much clinical testing has gone on for an ingredient to be effective. And now they want that ingredient to also be sustainable. There are going to be less options for you. There's going to be less options in ingredients for sustainable ingredients that are clean, that are non-toxic. There's going to be less options for packaging that is in your guideline. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's somewhat frustrating for a new beauty brand in general.
Yeah, I definitely think and agree that there's that can be frustrating, and it's so wonderful that they have experts like you to be able to help walk them through that challenging landscape. So I have a few more questions that we had skipped over, so I'm just going to go through here old school style and see if there's anything that I missed. So you mentioned efficacy and sustainability in ingredients, and one of the things that we've seen change over the past 5 years is this rise in clean beauty. And clean has really transitioned to sustainability. What is advice that you have to brands when looking at clean ingredients, trying to measure for toxicity, and being able to do their due diligence on that?
That's really hard. Because again, there's no real definition, and I'm completely impressed with the way that you've done the report in categorizing it. Right? Like no one has ever done that before. No one has ever said these are the standards that you should look for. And granted, the UN started that, but you're sort of explaining it. It's this dictionary and glossary all in one. And I think that's the first thing, is to realize, to understand what the benchmarks and what are your standards for looking for clean ingredients. Mm-hmm. Is it clean because it's non-toxic? Is it clean because it's sustainable? Is it clean because it's plant-based? Is it clean? What is your definition? Okay. Is it blue beauty? Is it green beauty? Is it green chemistry? And so before you start thinking about a product, you have to first think about the ingredient. Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to work with the suppliers that will give you that information. You have to be able to work with contract manufacturers who are willing to share the technical files. You have to understand where you're starting from. And I think that's really confusing for brands too, because they think that all of that information should be ready available, but it's not always available. And so sometimes ingredients are not selected, not because they're not clean or not toxic, but because they don't have the documentation to prove it. Mm-hmm. So I think that sort of is making it a standard first before you start formulating, and that's what's so nice about the Good Face Project, mm-hmm. is that they can look at the retailer guidelines and see, at least that's a starting point. So to be able to identify, it's kind of like saying, I'd like to date somebody tall. Mm-hmm. And they're like, ooh, like 5'10"? I was like, no, like 6'5". and so it's just like, I'd like to create a clean product, but what does that mean?
Yes.
And that's what you have to figure out first. What does clean mean to you?
Yeah. It's a good point, as I think, well, maybe as like I've gotten older, or anyone, when you get to that point where you just want people to tell you what to do, right? Because people have always told you what to do, and then you get to this point in life where you're like, oh my gosh, nobody's telling me what to do. What if I do it wrong? Like, there has to be a guideline. There has to be an answer, but that's not always the case, is it?
No, it's not. And the answers need to come from the brand, right? A formulator can create whatever you want. A contract manufacturer can create whatever you want. But as a brand, you need to know what you want. Mm-hmm. And the only way to know what you want is to have somebody guiding you through the process. And that's what we try to do, is we try to navigate that maze of clean mm-hmm. beauty, navigate that maze of sustainability in packaging, mm-hmm. and navigate the maze of what's important to you as a brand. And then you have to put those into a hierarchy. Okay. And decide, because you're never going to, at this point, maybe 5 or 10 years from, you are never going to be able to create exactly what you want. There's always going to be a compromise. and not to mention fragrance,
Mm-hmm.
or added essential oils and trying to get that to hit your standards. So it's certainly very confusing.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for going through that about how it is amazing the guidance that it takes from someone who knows the industry. And also, as you were talking, I was just thinking that it takes a large amount of collaboration, right? Like nobody has all the answers, and so gathering it from these different areas and having relationships is so key. And being open-minded to understanding what's out there, so then you can pull that in and learn from the people that are supporting you.
And I think that's the thing that's the most important, is that realizing that it is a huge network, right? I'm not a scientist. I can't formulate, but I can help the brand figure out what the guidelines are. But without our series of experts, packaging suppliers, understanding the sourcing, understanding where the ingredients come from, how to understand how to formulate with them. And just because you get a pile of green, clean ingredients doesn't even mean they're going to make a formula.
Yeah.
So, we're just I want to say the little squirrel gathering all the nuts from all the places and organizing them and then presenting them to the brand.
Yeah, I also see you as the glue. I think you're the glue for that brand of bringing together all those pieces, so it actually looks like something and not just like a big pile of nuts. So, yeah, that's great. What is the biggest obstacles to brands right now, in general, as being someone who works in the U.S. on the West Coast, working with many innovative brands? What are some of the biggest obstacles for brands right now?
I want to say everything is an obstacle.
Okay.
Packaging is an obstacle. Finding packaging at low MOQs for these newer brands. Understanding the difference in clean ingredients and sustainable ingredients. The difference. Clean doesn't mean sustainable. Sustainable doesn't mean clean. And then understanding how to communicate that message to the consumer. So I really think it's a huge challenge to be able to do that, and it's very time consuming, and I really applaud the industry, especially during the past year, of all the incredible webinars that we've listened to over the last year. Has been fantastic. I've never learned so much in my whole life. And it's because we're sitting down and we can replay those webinars, and we can watch and we can listen and we can put them into spreadsheets, and you never have been able to get all that information together, and I think that's been really good for us.
What do you think is the most immediate opportunity for brands as they are developing new products?
To me, the most exciting thing and this opportunity is to really share the list of ingredients, supply of packaging, sourcing, where everything comes from. It's really
transparency.
The transparency is key, and sort of explaining it into categories, like what you've done in the report. Clean ingredients, what are those? How do you find them? How do you test and make sure that they're clean? Packaging, that part of it, right? And then also the overall brand. Are you going to contract manufacturers that are also using electric or wind powered, so it's not just about the product itself, but how is that supply chain created? And I think it's categorizing those on their website and sharing what they're doing.
Information is key, right? Like and having access to information. And I think that's one of the things that when we saw in the clean beauty movement is really a push for transparency, a push for having publicly available information, especially from the government, but even that opportunity in the industry, what we can do for individual companies, no matter where you are, and making those requests as brands. So.
Yeah, thank you for organizing the report, and I think that everyone is going to be so blown away by how you've put everything into categories, and it makes so much sense now. It was so confusing before, and now the way that you've categorized it, and from yourself being a formulator and understanding clean and natural, being able to do it that way is really impressive.
Well, thank you so much. It was my pleasure, and it started out as a passion project. As you're saying, the communication and being able to create or have shared common language. That was one of the things I saw that was missing when working with new brands and talking to product developers like yourself, chemists, ingredient suppliers. There just seemed to be a lot of missing pieces. So the report was for me, and I'm happy to share it with everyone else too. So, and thank you so much for being an awesome partner and your contributions to the report. I know anyone who reads the report is going to get a lot out of it, and the product development role is so special because you can know everything about all these little pieces, but unless you're able to bring them together in a cohesive way, like you said, you're just going to have like a pile of jumbledness there and nothing cohesive. So thank you, Ameann.
You're welcome. Thank you, Hayley.
Okay. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Again, this is Ameann DeJohn, and if you need any help with product development, please reach out to her and make it a great day.